We're super consistent as you
But nothing is not steady.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was like, I could say, hey guys, I'm like hysterically crying right now, big morning, let's postpone this. But I'm like, let's just go right into it.
No, we want that energy. We do.
Yeah.
I had like a big drive this weekend. I drove back from California to Colorado. Cried for like 4 hours straight on the road. So we're like, we did some processing.
Crying?
You know, I don't know. It's been a big week.
We'll know why.
Yeah. Going home for me tends to be sometimes a little rocky occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Most often than not.
Generally.
Yeah.
Got it.
We're here. I've got some edamame.
Nice.
We're ready to rock and roll.
I love edamame.
That's the best.
Okay.
Now for our introduction.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fuck Wellness. I'm Mallory.
I'm McKenna.
And I'm Laura.
And I don't sound as good with a cold as Laura does. And I'm realizing that's kind of a disappointment because I was really trying to manifest your like deep, sexy voice that you get when you have a cold. And I just don't feel like I have it.
Yeah, I wish I could keep that around. I really try. Sometimes when I get sick and I get that voice, I'm like coughing so hard, like, keep it. I need that voice to stick.
Laura, I don't know if I told you this, but after you had a cold on one of our podcasts, my dad called me and was like, that's not Laura on your podcast. Like that has to be a different person. And I was like, no, she's just sultry as fuck.
My alter ego. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we are still in our month of Pride. This is our 4th episode. And we brought someone back who was incredibly popular on our first episode, and we are all big fans of them. Motti is on the podcast today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we could not be more excited that they're on.
Thank you. My name is Motti. I use they, them pronouns. I make videos and other things on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. Some use the word influencer. I do not. And I do stand-up comedy now. That's new since the last time that we spoke. And just like doing creative freelance stuff, a little bit of modeling, but basically just living as a queer person in Brooklyn is like the official title.
Motti, it's so funny because when I was writing down like labels that I would like list for you, I wrote comedian and social media funny human. Because I was like, I don't feel like influencer is how I would describe you, but it's like you're a human that's funny on social media, you know?
Yeah. I say like I'm online or like I'm like whatever. Yeah, I don't like influencer because when you break it down, it gets humiliating because like in the actual industry of like influencer engagement and stuff. So when brands reach out for partnerships and stuff, there's basically like a hierarchy of like how much you can charge based on your followers and stuff. And it goes influencer, micro influencer, and then nano influencer.
So my God.
So like technically in the business, like I would be a nano influencer. So I'm just like rejecting the title altogether because it just sounds so ridiculous. So I like to say like I'm online or just like I do social media or something.
I think that's fair. I think all the labels about social media are kind of confusing. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to start quickly talking about a music video you were recently in that we all have watched. I would love to hear a little bit about that experience. And it looks like quite a time.
Yeah, it was. And there's a lot of fun stuff. Oh, I would have gotten, if I had a heads up, I would have got, Maddie's fine. I could talk about it. So it's for my friend, Maddie Lakomski's song called A Little Louder. And so since I moved to Brooklyn, I made a great group of friends who created, directed, started, did everything for like a queer comedy web series. And so they have all of this like production experience and stuff, and their friend Maddie was releasing this song and they were tasked with directing and conceptualizing this music video for them. And so because I was starting to be friends with them, they knew I did creative work. They were like, can you come and be an extra? It's like based at it's supposed to be set at a party, like in an apartment. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just be in the background, whatever you need me to do. And then they were like, oh, we need someone to play the bartender. Can you do that? And I was like, I bartend, no problem. I know that role. And then the night before we were going to shoot, they were like, Motti. I was like, yes. And they were like, the male lead. And Maddie at the time identified as straight. And
Ooh, this is spicy.
This is a way better backstory than I was expecting.
So much better.
And the male lead had like a huge cold sore, like above his lip. And so they were like, sorry, dude, you like cannot be in this video. So they asked me if I could play like the male lead. And I was like, sure. Like, can't promise. Never done anything like that. But I'm used to, I guess, being in front of a camera. And so then we did that. I met Maddie an hour before we started shooting, and we played each other's like love interests. And there was a lot of like intimate locked eyes and stuff like that.
A lot of smolders.
Yeah. And so between everybody, including all the extras and the crew, except for maybe like 3 people being queer, and Maddie being friends with those people, she has since then come out as queer and identifies that way and wanted to release the music video during Pride. And so that's what she did. We had been making jokes about it that day while we were filming. We're like, by the time, we're done doing this, like, you never know, like it's going to be Pride Month. And it was raining that day. And as we were shooting, there was a rainbow, and we were all just like, this is so gay. So that's the backstory. A really fun one, but it was so fun to be on. I got to learn that I love being on set. I love taking direction. So I'm like, this is good to know. And yeah, it's really fun to like work with friends and see them in action and how talented they are and stuff. And the song is really good.
No, we blasted it before you came on.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It's like a queer pop summer moment.
Okay. Also, when we last had you on, you were still in the process of moving. So how has that been?
Yeah. I was in Fayetteville when we spoke. Amazing. So I got here in Bushwick in January, and it's been great. The whole reason, and I might have mentioned it on the first episode that we did, but like wanted to be where people were doing things, hence like the music video I just did. I wanted to be where queer people were making art and like collaborating and doing things together. And I just wasn't getting that in North Carolina, which I knew when I moved down there. And yeah, I've been now on a couple different like modeling sets, 2 music video sets. I'm like collaborating with other comedians that I've only really known online. And so it all feels like I'm doing what I came here to do, which feels good. New York's expensive.
I love that.
And I recently quit my job. So that's a little stressful, but other than that, it's just so great.
I love that. Can we also talk about comedy? Sorry, I want to hear about comedy. Also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boom, let's go.
Sorry.
What do you want to know about comedy?
Everything. I have literally
the definition would be great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel like breaking into the comedy scene can be very I know nothing about it other than like listening to people talk about it, but I think that it's kind of a club, and so I'd love to hear about kind of breaking into that. And I think that there's a lot of comedy that's not so great, which I think that is also tricky when there are long-standing comedians that are problematic or in communities that are really entrenched with that.
Yeah. I don't know that I'd say I broke into the comedy scene just yet. I'm still very, very new, and it's not like I'm on shows or anything. I'm just doing open mics and then what I've been doing with like short form video online and stuff. But I've always backstory. I've always been in love with comedy, but it was always a thing that I was interested in, but not something I ever considered I could also do. So when I was younger, I was glued to the TV watching SNL, like obsessed with it, every single time that there was a new episode. I remember we went and saw Brian Regan. That was the first stand-up I ever saw. I don't know if y'all have heard him, but he's just like an incredible stand-up. He's very like animated on stage. And does really great like voice work. And so we bought his like CD, and then we would play it in the car whenever we had like a long car ride. Grew up watching like Mad TV, Comedy Central, MTV, and then ages 17 to 20 worked in a comedy club as a server. And so these were all just like things I would like align myself with comedy, but I'm like, but I can't I can't do that. Like I could never get on stage. And then after going and having leadership roles in school, which we talked about last time, and like going to grad school, becoming a public speaker for like for the queer space, and then being on in front of my phone all the time and on camera, I was like, maybe going on stage isn't that scary. And so I felt a lot of support from my friends who are comics and who are successful in it. And I enrolled in a stand-up like class through the Comedy Cellar in the Village. And so I was going, it was a 5-week course, and I would learn how to conceptualize my jokes, write the jokes, deliver them, like how to kind of like economize and make them shorter. And then we did a showcase at the Fat Black Pussycat, which is a Comedy Central venue, or a Comedy Cellar venue. And that was just like really cool. I got, my family came to support. My dad heard me make jokes about masturbating and was the loudest laugh in the room. Yeah. And I was like, thank God. Okay. Like, I'm just like, thank God I come from a family where like they appreciate like the humor and the honesty. So that's how I started doing it. And then as soon as I got that little bit of confidence and like affirmation from like getting laughs in a room where people paid to come in, I was going to like 6, 7, 8 open mics a week, just like bopping around. This was when I still had like my full-time job, bombing some places, doing so well the other place. And I've fallen in love with like the editing process and like going up, hearing how that didn't get delivered, and then sitting back down with it and reworking the way that it's written or the way that I deliver it. And I've learned a lot about like the writing process, and like you start with a voice memo, like and it also, it's not just going up there and telling jokes. So you can go, is this okay to continue to talk about? You want to hear about comedy? So what I've learned in comedy and in terms of like, what are you going to say on stage, is I can talk about a completely unique experience that nobody in the room knows anything about and has never experienced. But as long as I convince you that this is my perspective and my point of view and my experience, then you don't have to relate to it in order to laugh. So it's all about like proving your point and like defending your case, basically. So I can go up there and I'll be like, you know what's the most annoying thing about New York? It's the yellow cabs. And everyone will be like, the yellow cabs are amazing. But if I tell a story about why it's so ridiculous and I am confident in it and I like stand by it, then that's how you engage with the audience. And so when you're creating a joke, so I have a joke that I want to write, and I don't know how I want to write it yet. Last week, a woman took me home. And when we got there, she told me it was like the apartment she's pet sitting at, like not her own apartment. And I think that that's ridiculous. I think that that's hilarious and ridiculous. And it's for an elderly dog. And you know those like staircases that go up to beds for like animals to get up. So there was one like towards the foot of the bed. So, you know, we're like doing the thing, kind of getting undressed. I get her on the bed, and
did you walk up the bitty stairs?
Because they were right in front of me, so it was either that or like
go around
over them or like go around them. There was no like good way to do this smoothly, so I kind of just did it, and I thought that it was enough where like she wouldn't notice, and then like we had to laugh about it. But it's like experiences like that. So I'm like, but what is the point I'm trying to make about it? Is it the point that like the gig economy is so insane that people are like pet sitting and like bringing their one night stands home there? Am I trying to say that like dating in New York is insane and that's why? So you kind of have to like identify what it is you are actually trying to convey. So like that's kind of my writing process right now. Yeah.
I do have to admit that I have done that.
You've done that?
Wait, you've walked up the stairs, or you?
No stairs involved, no elderly dog involved, but did hook up with someone. Like pretty much random hookup at a pet sitting house.
Which I don't think is like inherently a bad thing. It's more of just like, one, how would I feel if I hired somebody and let them like stay over while
it was kind of an issue for me ethically. I did struggle with it a little bit.
Like we stayed over, like I fully slept there. And another thing was she was like, don't worry, I already checked for cameras.
Yeah. That's what I was worried about. Is I've gone places with like Ring cameras, and I'm like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I did ask if I could have a friend over. I asked that. So.
And you did, in some sense of the word, had a friend over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think it's like morally wrong. It's more just like hilarious and like ridiculous. Like we got there and I'm like really realizing that she is none of the people in these picture frames. Like she didn't disclose it to me before we got there, which is just funny.
I feel like it's another layer if it's the bed that they sleep on.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah, it's Manhattan. There's one bed. But the sheets were and maybe she cleaned.
You know what? I think maybe she could handle that.
Honestly, it's good, but at least it was like queer sex, so it's not like there's like condoms and like ejaculate somewhere, you know, in the vicinity.
Yucky.
It's like the one plus side, I guess.
That's a funny I don't know, view of comedy where it's like that is an hilarious experience that you've had, but how do you get on stage and tell that in a way that's gonna really land? Like I feel like just telling that story is really funny, especially with like the little acting of like going up the stairs. But I think it could like have a much bigger punch if it had some kind of background, like you were saying.
Yeah. So two things. That's called an act out, and then what you're saying is it has legs.
Nice. Thank you for the lingo.
Yeah, definitely that. And sometimes it is just storytelling, and I am a storyteller, like just in general, and I think that's usually how my comedy comes out. But yeah, sometimes it's like nice to have a formula to it, but sometimes you can just go up there and the story speaks for itself. But yeah.
Do you feel like ever taking, like maybe before taking this course, but like it's changed the lens that you look through the world at? Like you kind of like see things that would be good jokes more than you did before? Or were you always just the type of person to be like, that would be a good joke?
I kind of have always been like, that would be a good joke. And I think a lot of my comedy thrives in just like situational comedy, like with my friends and stuff like that. But definitely more now, especially because I think more of like prompts. So we were given homework, and our prompts would be like, an inanimate object that pisses me off is, or like something I hate, or like something that makes me angry. You want something that elicits a very strong emotion. And so in times I will be like, oh, I gotta write that down. And so I either will make a voice memo about it, or I'll put it in my notes app so I don't forget about it.
It's so funny to think back when I was younger, I had this story, and it was a very like dramatic story that happened to me. And I'm not even sure what actually happened because I've changed it so many times depending on like who I've told it to. Like I've changed, the parts that are funny, or I've made more extreme, and the parts that are less funny, like less extreme. So it'd be funny to go back to the actual situation and like see what actually happened, because I feel like it's had so many iterations of me trying to figure out how to tell it in the like most hilarious way that it probably doesn't have like that much truth left to it.
That's
to be
the
clear,
good thing about comedy.
To be clear, it's me jumping off of a dam and ripping my butthole open, in case anyone.
I literally knew it was that story.
I knew.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How? I need more.
Are we going to tell the story on the pod right now? Well, okay, I'll do the short version. Oh no, I've told it to pretty much everyone that knows.
Now it's a really good form. It's in its final form.
Okay, so there's this dam in my hometown, and it was a really popular place for the high schoolers to go and like hang out on a summer day. And so if you wanted to jump off the top, it was probably between like 55 to 60 feet to jump off. So like, not a short fall. And so I was with my boyfriend at the time, and my friend and her boyfriend, and they were all like jumping off, having no problem. And I was like, are we crazy? This is really high. Like, this is really high. But I was so deeply in love with this man that, he was at the bottom, like, please jump in. And, I was a sap at the time. So I was like looking over the edge, and I just, eventually was like, I got to do it. And they told me to pencil jump, which I turned out to not be the move. So I jumped off, and as I was falling, like I felt my body tilt the opposite way. So I was like going ass first towards the water. Obviously, like impact doesn't do well with that part of the body.
Oh my God.
So ripped open, like, you know, not like a hemorrhoid, like definitely, you know, opened up. And I was wearing white bathing suit. So that also did not go well. So I'm in the water, can't breathe because had a pretty big impact. And I'm there like, okay, I got to think fast. I potentially have, you know, poop all over me, and I need to climb back up to the top of the dam. So as I like swim towards the edge of the water, I roll myself in the mud, like
so smart, insanely smart.
Thank you. I like roll myself in it and then start to like climb back up the top. And like I get to the top.
At any point, did you like do a little feel, like a swipe or any? No. Okay.
No, I was in survival mode. No,
You were like,
it was pure survival.
Like, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. And like my boyfriend at the time kept like trying to get close to me, make sure I was okay, but I didn't want him to like smell anything. So I was like, I need some space right now. I got back up to the top. I was like just laying there, and eventually we went home, but turned out
you
that
were in pain.
Oh, I was in so much pain, but again, like love blinds everything. Like, really, like,
yeah.
Oh God, my dad will not stop calling me. Love you, Dad. Anyway, but eventually it turns out that I fractured part of my coccyx on my fall.
Wow.
So
do you have to get like stitches? Do you have to
no
get, like,
stitches? It just healed naturally, but poop was not pleasant for quite a few days. And to this day, as far as I know, the boyfriend still doesn't know what happened.
Wow.
I never told him, which I feel like is a red flag in a relationship if you're not able to tell them. But anyway, I mean, this is not my most hysterical telling. I feel like I haven't told it in quite a long time, but that's the story.
It's a good story, Mom.
Well, it's so incredibly tragic. Like that's wild.
There's different types of jokes, you know.
But the good thing about comedy is that you can lie, and you sometimes should lie. So you could tell that story and like just make something absolutely ridiculous up.
And again, like I'm not fully sure what, like that's my memory, but I feel like if I went back, like maybe half of that actually happened, you know.
Like everybody there knew that you ripped your asshole, and they were just like, let's just not tell her.
Yeah. I'm like, I truly don't know. Anyway, that's my story.
Wow.
Should we talk about pride?
Yeah, great transition.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. I feel like we should start off with some super basic questions, like, you know, thinking about pride. What does that word even mean to you in the first place? Like, give us some definitions.
Be who you are for your pride. Wow. Well, I mean, literal definition, I don't even know, but like pride as like a time, as a month, I think just, I don't know, it's difficult. I think a lot of queer people have a weird relationship with like pride, because I mean, I appreciate that we have a month, but also like I feel like I am doing the same things like all the time. I don't think anything changes. I just go to more parties during the month of June. And so to me, I think it's nice because there's an increase in the amount of space that is available for queer people, like in the city, you know, like there's been so many marketplaces and parties, but not necessarily just in like the like drinking way, but in like the more like networking and socializing and just like being with one another way. There's more like queer lineups on comedy shows and live concerts and things like that. But once again, it's like, okay, this is for it. You still have like the rainbow capitalism. You still have people taking advantage of pride. And this pride is the first time that any companies and any brands that have reached out to me have like honored my rate. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about like how much is like industry standard to like charge for an Instagram post or a TikTok post or stuff. And I usually like reject a lot of partnerships that get pitched to me just because, once again, like I don't want to feel like an influencer, but sometimes I just like, you know, have to pay rent. And so I try to do more like queer companies, or at least ones that are like employing and supporting queer people and things like that. And this is the first time that I've been like, well, this is my rate. And they've been like, yeah. usually everyone, and they're like huge, sometimes really big companies, will reach out. I'll give them my media kit, say how much I'm charging, which once again is industry standard. And they'll be like, well, like we have a small budget because we're a smaller company. Like, how about we send you like free, products in exchange? And I'm like, I don't really want your products. And that's like free labor. It's not rocket science, obviously, but it's not easy to like just create content for a company that you don't work for. Like I like to do my research and at least make it good content. So that's cool for Pride, but I know going into July, that probably will not continue to happen. I feel like they're probably just doing it for Pride. So sometimes it's performative, but I guess maybe better than nothing. But yeah, I love the amount of time that I've been spending with the queer community during Pride. And I think a lot of it is also like spending the time doing like the reading and consuming of queer media and where it comes from, and knowing that Pride started with a Black trans woman, and it started with a Black trans woman throwing a brick at a cop. And it wasn't just this like feminist movement or like queer liberation movement. It was very much from trans people of color, and it was violent and scary. And it was a riot. And so it's like good to make sure we're like commemorating those folks and remembering like where this freedom has come from to begin with.
What do you feel like Pride looks like day to day for you? Like outside of just this month, but like trying to figure out how to feel pride and like who you are and like your identity and whatever like labels you will use or may not use.
I think it all comes back to the words that I always use to describe like my content and myself, and that is just like transparency, vulnerability, and like honesty. Pride to me, like having pride in yourself and your identity and your community, is like living that life out loud and not holding back and not apologizing for who you are. And so to me, like every day that I go out in a binder, I've started like going out in my little mascara mustaches, but for the past 2 years, I've only been doing it in like the privacy of my own home. I've went to like 2 events with it on, and like that's pride. And like anytime that I like try a new outfit on that's gender affirming, that's pride. Yeah, like things like that.
Are there times that it's felt harder to feel pride, like that stick out to you, or times that it has felt easier?
Easier is when you're just like in queer spaces, of course. Harder is when you are not in those spaces, or maybe it's a queer space but it's like all cis gay white men. Like there's a lot of like community spaces and bars and stuff in New York City and Brooklyn, Manhattan and Brooklyn, that are labeled as like this is a queer space, whatever, but it's really just like cis white gay guys, which is amazing. They should have space, but it's not like necessarily trans friendly. And it might be labeled as such, but it's like, but where? And like, how can you prove that this is a safe place for trans people? So navigating that sometimes is a little difficult. And I mean, just like any community, there's like people, like I go to like crowded, like a lesbian bar on a Wednesday night called The Woods that like everybody goes to. And I've gone the past 3 Wednesdays or 2 Wednesdays during Pride. And it's like so crowded. I don't even know where I was going with that, but like sometimes it's hard because I don't know where I was going with that. Something made me want to talk about that. Oh, but just like because it's like it's called a lesbian night, but then a lot of trans mask people like are there and belong there. And those spaces are usually very white, and things like that. So, and like if you're in a space where you're getting like misgendered and stuff, then it is hard. Like I let myself get misgendered at work for like 18 months. I was working for a company that like just was not getting my pronouns right, and I wasn't advocating for myself because I figured it would be easier to just let it kind of slide, and like this is a job, clock in, clock out, just like let it happen. And so that's like when it's difficult, when you think your job might be on the line, or you think you might piss somebody off by correcting them. or like by advocating for yourself. Some people take it like really personally and like they get offended when they feel like they've offended someone, which is just like such a funny thing. And so that makes it difficult to like live your true self, because I was compromising for like comfort at work, basically, until I was done. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore.
I think like the idea of pride and like showing pride is really, I think it's interesting how it can feel very like fun and like, yes, 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 like kind of like uplifting yourself in a way, like, you know, like presenting how you want to present, or going to, you know, the woods on Wednesdays or something like that. That feels very fun. But I also think it's really interesting how like your presence on social media it's all about like the visibility and vulnerability of like having pride, and that is not always like rah fun shit. Like
no, it is not.
It's like hard shit sometimes. And I think that like sharing, so like, I mean, if your job is social media, like you're going to be front facing to a lot of people at all times kind of doing that stuff. And I'm just kind of wondering how you're like feeling about that, because I can't, I mean, at least for me, like I feel like this is maybe like the most front facing thing that I do, is being on this podcast. And even then, there are times when I share a lot, and there are times when I don't share so much, because I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling that this week. Like I'm not feeling that strength. But like, you know, this isn't my full-time job also. Like I'm not getting paid to be vulnerable on this podcast. But then when I am vulnerable, like I think it can be so exhausting for me. Like it's just like, it's even when it's positive stuff, like it's not even like, you know, crying and stuff front facing to our audience. It's not like that. It's even the positive stuff gets me so exhausted. So I'm just like wondering how you're doing. Like you are so raw on social media, and we've talked about this before, but like, you know, do you have to like take like moments? Because I mean, you literally like minutes ago you were like so raw, and now you're on this podcast talking to us. Like what, how do you bounce back to that? Like
I think just like even before anything on social media, I was always experiencing a wide range of emotions at any given point, because that's just like who I am, an emotional person, and I express those emotions pretty strongly. A couple things. You're right, it's not always like the happy stuff. Sometimes it's like difficult, and sometimes there's even discourse within the community, and so like that's exhausting during Pride. During Pride is also an opportunity for conservative people and for like homophobic, transphobic people to like, because the amount of queer content online and just like in life is increased during Pride, the conservative people and anyone who is signing those bills and trying to take away trans rights and things like that, that rhetoric is increased as a direct result, because they're combating the increase of queer stuff. And so like that's a lot. I mean, for the past 2 years we've been getting a lot of bad news about gay rights and trans rights, but especially during Pride when people have really nasty things to say. So that's hard for sure. In terms of like, do I take a break? Full transparency, I almost took myself into a mental, like I was like, I'm going to, you know, not make it a little bit a few weeks ago. I had run out of my Wellbutrin, and because my therapist had to move, and so I was like in between therapists, I was referred to a psychiatrist so that I could get prescribed my Wellbutrin again and get back on it, because I've been on it for 2 years. And the psychiatrist I was referred to was like, well, I think you might have bipolar disorder, and so therefore I'm going to refer you to somebody else, and I'm not prescribing you Wellbutrin. And so I'm continuing to not be on this life-saving medication that I'm on. And on top of that, I'm like, do I have a new diagnosis now? Like all of a sudden. And on top of that, I've been having a really hard time with the idea of being perceived. And I've been struggling a lot with imposter syndrome with the social media stuff, with the comedy stuff, I feel like increasingly my support is, you know, gradually it's still like increasing, and some of my like idols are like following me on social media and like giving me support, and people who I look up to, whether like in the comedy industry or just like queer folks. And like it's like a dream come true. And for some reason I have it in my head that this person who decided to follow me didn't do their research, didn't actually look at my page, only saw one post that they liked, followed me, and now they're going to regret it, and like all of this. And I cannot just let myself believe that somebody would want to follow me and consume my content. So I'm struggling a lot with that. And I find that it affects, I've all of a sudden feel socially awkward in some spaces. Like at the woods, I'll run into some of those people, or I'll just feel people staring at me, which I'm sure some of it is because people recognize me from online, and my friends are like, well, Motti, it's also just because you're good looking. So obviously people are going to stare at you. And that's also something that I'm not going to like accept, because I'm like, no, I'm not. And so it's just a lot of like perception stuff when so many people are, and it's not even that many people. I mean, I think about people who have like 1 million followers on TikTok. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. But I have been like struggling a lot with my mental health. And there's times where like I'm staying up late at night, I can't sleep, and I'm like, should I delete every single thing I've ever posted on social media? Like, should I go private? Like, what am I doing? Is this embarrassing? Like, do people hate me? Do people think I'm annoying? Do I post too much? Yeah, like all of that. Like it's sometimes like very negative. I am someone who tends to see like the silver lining and like the positive, and I'll let that kind of like trump all of the negative stuff. But yeah, sometimes it gets to you like pretty bad. I have a hard time believing that people like me and like want to see stuff. So that's just something I have to work with. But yeah, that's so sometimes I have to take a break. I have to take a break physically from like spaces I'm going to, because just I need to. Like last weekend I stayed in bed the whole weekend, even though it's Pride and there's like things going on at all times. I haven't taken like a break from social media where I'm logging out, I'm not posting anything, but I do like scale back on like how much of myself I'm putting out there. And like one week maybe it's just a bunch of silly posts and there's nothing that has to do with mental health or like my anything that I struggle with. Like let's just post jokes and repost memes and stuff. So that's kind of like how I separate it. I don't feel like it always has to be on, because I think that I am like multi-dimensional in terms of the content that I do produce. Some people do follow me for the comedy, some people follow for the mental health stuff, some people follow for the queer stuff. Of course that's going to overlap for some folks, but I feel like I have different avenues that I can like give my energy to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like that is a very, that's like I definitely relate to that, and I know that people in my life relate to the like struggle of like, am I worthy of this love and attention that I'm getting? Like, who am I to even like deserve that? And I do like, you know, I want you to like take a break when you need, but I also keep sharing because I think it's so relatable. But yeah, I think that like the whole it's very easy for people to be like, oh my God, like all these kids nowadays don't even have real jobs. They're just like online, like whatever, like getting paid to do whatever. And I'm like, y'all, that job is like, that's like the hardest ever. Like you cannot give people shit for that at all, because a little bit of, I feel like last episode that we had on the pod was like vulnerable, and like the amount of like just weird feelings that I'm having from sharing that amount is like, I just could not, it's not sustainable for my being. And
I want to make something so clear. I do not make like I mentioned like sometimes I do get like sporadic, and at like I don't know how I'm like, how am I going to pay July rent? Just to be like totally transparent. Like I am not racking in like the big bucks. Obviously people with a lot of followers and like sponsorships do, but once again, like I know that I can capitalize more on my platform. Oh, I think my AirPods. Can you hear me?
You sound
okay.
good.
Like I know that I could capitalize on it more and like monetize on it if I were to engage more and like make certain content that is going to bait people to want to sponsor me and stuff. But it's just not something I feel comfortable doing. So not only am I like always being vulnerable and like putting out like the emotional stuff, but I am not being compensated for it. So and then the other thing, oh, there was something else I wanted to respond, and I forget what you had mentioned that made me think of it, but we can come back to it. But yeah, that's the vulnerability stuff. I do check-ins with myself if it's too much. Oh, so this was the other thing. Absurdism. Literally, the planet is burning. People are insane. Our government is a joke. Why not just like put that shit out there? Like I understand, like I'm just like, it's a disaster no matter what. What difference does it make if you know like something about my intimate sex life, or if you know about me being suicidal 2 weeks ago? Like just put it out there, because in the end, like what does it really matter? And I think there's a privilege behind that, obviously. But that's kind of how I see it. I'm just like, we're all gonna end up in the same place anyway. I don't want to spend a single second being anybody that I'm not. And it also helps with like my whole like weird thing of being perceived, is that I at least know that when people meet me in person, they are getting exactly what they get online. And I think I'd have a lot more anxiety about it if I was like pretending to be somebody that I wasn't. So that's kind of how I cope with that.
I want to say thanks for sharing all of that. Also, my dog just will not calm down back here. So if you
I
see
haven't
his
heard
tail,
a thing.
that's good. I think that we're in a unique time where there are kids who are looking and realizing that working on social media is a potential job opportunity. And so it's kind of this thing where I still feel like people regard it as not a real job, like Lara was saying, but then at the same time, everyone wants it in a weird way, or they think that they want it. And without kind of understanding the ins and outs of what that actually entails. And I think that for a lot of people who I see on social media, I think we talked about this last episode, but social media is just very difficult for me to spend too much time on. I just like my capacity is literally like 5-10 minutes max. But there are people who you can very clearly tell like their branding is like they've gotten very clear on who they are as a person through their branding, and they present as a brand and then a person. And there are people who try and replicate those brands and kind of fit their personalities into those things. And I just really appreciate that with you. I feel like it's a person and not a brand. And that's where I think your magic comes from, is being able to relate to people in that way on a personal level. And even just, I think that there's a lot of people who, even talking about like financial, like the finances of this job or lack of finances in this job, they would not want to speak on that because it disrupts the quote image. And so I think that it's just, I really appreciate you sharing all that. And then also, of course, just like all the other work that you do. And I love the idea of kind of you coming back to those 3 words that you were talking about of like, this is who I am. And it's just this is what I'm going to be, if whether you meet me in a bar or you see my Instagram feed.
Yeah. I can't imagine how like nerve-wracking it would be for like someone to approach me and then like be disappointed or be like, oh, Motti is not how they seem like online. And so that's kind of how I like rationalize that. There are some like influencers who are actually like huge and making money off of it, who participate in like the whole like wealth transparency thing, which I think is awesome. I'm a fan of wealth transparency. But yeah, thanks for saying things. The one thing that I don't mind actually like taking the credit for and like being proud of myself for is when people are like, hey, I realized that I was queer from your content, or like I started reading up on like non-binary and trans and gender non-conforming identities, and it's something I want to look into for myself because I saw your video or whatever. Those kinds of things of like, hey, like the direct impact of your transparency in this one Instagram post has done these things for me. I will happily be like, yes, thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for even watching my content and reading my content. That makes me if I do that for one person, which I've done it for thousands, and that sounds cocky, but like that's the one thing I'm like okay being cocky with, is that I've gotten thousands of messages from people saying, hey, you've helped me through this rough time with mental health, or you helped me leave an abusive relationship or whatever. And I will always be proud of that the most. And so I'll let myself have that, because it does come at like a really big like emotional labor cost. Yeah.
Mallory, unmuting, or do you have something else?
No, if you have a question, you can ask.
No, I'm just thinking just a lot about, like, I know that we also talked about being perceived in the last episode, and I just from my like own personal life, I've been really working on that, and it in similar ways, but obviously in different areas, like working on allowing myself to be perceived, and like you said, kind of allowing like not credit necessarily, but just like being able to sit in who you are, and like allowing other people to feel like the true weight of who you are in a good way. And I just think it's another added layer when it's obviously a public process, or you are known publicly. And like Laura was saying, even on this podcast, like it's so much easier on a podcast to pretend like I just said it to Mal and Laura. Like it's just when it's super vulnerable, I'm like, I forget, I push it out of my brain. And I'm like, when someone approaches me later with like, hey, like, I remember you said this, or someone I kept talking about relationships and like all these things, and they'll come back and approach me. I'm like, oh, like, I forget that this is real. Like, this isn't a fake world. Like, this is important.
Yeah.
But then, but I think similarly for us, like when we get messages about how like this little show has helped people, it's like, well, of course, like we're going to keep doing it because it feels so good. I don't really know where this was going, but it's just like it's a lot. And I think that you're doing a really good job navigating it simply by being compassionate to yourself and like allowing yourself to fully process a lot of that.
Thank you. I feel like when I come on here, you guys just compliment me. It's nice. McKenna, you were struggling the last time we talked with like people pleasing, right?
Yeah.
Like, does that have to do with the perception? Do they intertwine?
Oh, fully. Yeah. It also has a lot to do with like career wise. I feel like I don't belong in like in a box, and I'm not sure how to like present myself. And it's kind of kept me from doing a lot of things because I'm scared to just like be like, yeah, this is just me. Like, I am just this person and this is what I do, because there have been people who say like, well, you can't do that. Like, you have to choose a label. You have to choose like a way to describe yourself. With, I guess sometimes you do, but sometimes it's like, okay, just to be,
you do this, you do something spiritual, you do like readings, and then physical therapy, or one of you in physical therapy or something?
Not really. Mal did
Or
like a yoga
medicine?
training.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was.
No, that is physical. I mean, it's a physical therapist.
Therapy.
Yeah. Mal does like all the like personal training stuff.
Personal training.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was something like
Mallory, I'm not wrong right now. Why are you laughing?
No. I'm just like, yeah. Yes. It just is. There are a lot of words. Yeah.
But I don't know. Also, my word, I choose a word for every year. And this year, there we go. My word was wild, which I've been really trying to like lean into. I would say I'm doing like a C grade of it so far. However, I'm trying really hard.
What's the goal with picking a word? To embody it?
To embody it. Yeah.
Okay.
The irony of embody being your word last year, right?
Embody was my word last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Embody.
Yeah.
How do you pick them?
I just like think about it for a second, and the first thing that comes, I just choose it. I don't know. This year I'm really working through a lot of like old beliefs that I'm like the good, responsible girl. And so I'm really trying to like swing a bit the other way.
Oh my God. A hot girl summer.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Literally hot girl summer because our house doesn't have AC and I'm dying.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
I'm
cool.
all just dripping sweat. It's horrible.
Wait, McKenna, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, McKenna, I feel like I like to talk about the labels thing because I do feel like that's something that is very complicated for you, is like in the sphere that you work in, like it feels like labels are like what defines you, but I feel like what the conversations we have is like you don't feel like any of those labels actually like align with who you are. But then it's like, how do you, like, promote might be the wrong word, but like how do you fit in the space if you're not using the labels that everyone else is?
Yeah. Yeah. If that's how you're recognized, like if that's how that work is recognized, how do you make that distinction? Which, Motti, I really like that you have the words. Like I'd rather just pick words and just know that that's like, I can funnel everything through like these things that I'm embodying.
Yeah.
And it'll work out how it's supposed to work out after that.
Yeah. Do you want to know how I kind of like came to value those words and like where they came from? So in grad school, I got my master's in public administration and I focused in local government management. And in a lot of those local government management classes, you take like people managing, system managing, and things like that. And you learn the like core values of public administration. And if any of my professors listen to this, I don't know the exact list anymore, but in that list is, I mean, maybe not vulnerability, but transparency and accountability are two of like the big things when it comes to ideal and like good public administration. Governments should be transparent and accountable for the actions they take. I mean, obviously that's not always what happens, but in like an ideal world, in good public admin, that's what would happen. And we always had to do assignments based around those core values. And I always like to do it on transparency because I just took a liking to it. And I was just like, transparency is really fucking cool. And then I graduated and having, seen that word 1,000 times, and then doing whatever I was doing on TikTok during the pandemic, it kind of just made sense. So because I am like a public person and people do like, watch some of my stuff for advice or whatever, like I kind of feel like a local government and I have to be transparent in order for this to be like an ethical system, where you are receiving something from me and in exchange I'm receiving your support, your tax dollar, and there should be transparency and accountability there. So that's how I picked that. But every year, I like the idea of picking a word. My year for 2022, it wasn't necessarily a resolution. It was just say yes to everything. I was like, Motti, you're moving back to Brooklyn or moving back to New York. You're going to be living in Brooklyn. This is not a time to like turn down opportunity. This is not a time to like be scared of trying new things. And that's how I took that comedy class and how I said yes to being the lead in that music video. I could have said, no, I don't think I'm right for this job. But I'm like, if I'm bad, you'll let me know and you'll find someone else, kind of thing. So I like the idea of like picking something for the year or whatever.
I love that, saying yes to things.
Mm-hmm. Which is like so clear. I mean, it's not novel, like people have been doing that.
But still,
but I was
hard.
Just like really trying to like take it seriously. Like, no, actually say yes to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually ties into one of my questions. So in preparation for this episode, I was going back to some of your kind of recent posts.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I wanted to ask about is you have I'm feel weird like reading back a post that you wrote to
I know.
You're gonna like this.
But I feel like it's super relevant to this. So it was the video, I think it was the one of you getting the binder for the first time. And in the video you caveat that I think that you weren't non-binary at like that wasn't a term that you were identifying with. And in the comments, people were basically like, yeah, I mean, you are.
Yeah.
And you were sort of struggling with like what words you wanted to use at the time to identify yourself. So, I'm just thinking about the people listening to this podcast or the people that listen to your Instagrams and TikToks. Like, could you talk a little bit about how you decided what language to use and maybe like offer some advice for people who are still trying to figure out what language they want to use? Because I'm sure it's like a different journey for everyone, but like, what did yours look like?
Absolutely. In that video that I referenced, it's so funny. That was November 19th of 2020, because I just stitched it because it was about wearing the binder for the first time. And I just made a video on TikTok before we came on here, stitching it, being like, I just scheduled a top surgery appointment for pretty much around that time in 2022. Crying,
Woo!
of course. Yes, woohoo. And in that video, I said, I am not trans, but I am realizing that I'm gender nonconforming. And I was so afraid of taking up space. This was when I was gaining a following. I didn't have any big numbers yet. It was between like 10 and 20,000, I think, at that time. Maybe more, maybe it was more than that, but it was around October of that year that like things started taking off. But I was so hyper aware of the way other people were like getting attacked in their comment sections if they like used a word that wasn't right for them. And because people were following me for some of my content, I didn't want people to watch a video where I was like, I'm trans, and then they follow me expecting to have this trans representation that I wasn't going to be able to provide or do it accurately, and I didn't even know if that word was for me. In my head, it's like trans was only for, like folks who, not necessarily folks who transition, but folks who identify as like a trans man or a trans woman. And I knew I wasn't quite there. And I don't think that I am there or that I will be. I feel very secure in like the non-binary or like gender non-conforming label. And so I didn't want to offend anyone. I didn't want to take up space where it didn't belong. And I just wasn't educated in it. And it really didn't help that people were commenting saying, if you're gender nonconforming, then you're trans, because they weren't saying it in a way where they're like, hey, let me DM you some resources about how to learn more about it. It was more of like, and not that they have to, but if you're going to comment at all, it felt very like aggressive and as if they were like yelling at me, and that they were labeling me before I was ready to take on any kind of label, which is just, I would never do that to someone. It felt so insane to me that they were doing that. And maybe that's tied to like internalized transphobia, or just like the ignorance of not knowing exact like the umbrella and how non-binary people do fall under the trans umbrella. And so I don't think I started using like trans as like a descriptor, and I try to say as much as I can trans non-binary, just to like kind of make it more specific, once again, to not take space where I don't belong. And until like the past couple months, I would say, because trans folks were saying, yeah, you're a part of our community, like, and I would see the graphics of like, this is the umbrella, and like quite literally GNC and like non-binary are under here. And so, yeah, like that was just like when I like felt like it was okay, and other people around me who identify as non-binary were using the trans label. And so that's when I felt okay to like start calling myself that. And I do very much feel like I'm a part of that community, obviously with differences, and there's obviously different identities within that label. And so that's how I started feeling comfortable. And I really don't think that was for like the past couple months. I just didn't know what words were for me is all. And then like TikTok is a wonderful space to like learn about new identities, but it's also a really toxic place to try to discover yourself in, because everybody wants to tell you who you are, which isn't productive, I don't think.
Last week,
like,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just saying, last week, my therapist, like I'm working through something, and my therapist was like, well, have you thought about like not talking to your friends about it for a couple days? Like, have you thought about not processing every thought that you have as it comes? And I'm just thinking about how that's hard for me with just like my friends. And I think that would be even more difficult when you have, people who are giving maybe their unsolicited advice or opinions, where you're just like, yeah, can I just turn you off for a few weeks while I figure this out? Like there's not always that easy off button from other people's opinions.
Yeah. Weird about me, I don't like reach out to friends when I'm like going through something. Which maybe is like surprising, but I tend to just do it on my own and like process it in real time. I'll like throw it on my story. But it's pretty seldom that I'm like reaching out and being like, oh, I'm like struggling with this one thing. Like if I'm in a talking stage with a girl, I'm not like going through like every milestone and stuff with my friends. And maybe that's like a bad thing and maybe I should share more with my friends. Obviously if like something big happens or something funny happens, but I'll like throw up on my close friend story like, LOL, like really feeling like I want to die this week, might check myself into and I'm like, I've got like 25 people on this close friends list. Like no one says a thing. Like some people do, but I'm just like, I don't know. I think maybe because I put so much out in like the public that I'm like, I don't know.
I don't think that you have to process with other people. I think I'm annoyingly an external processor. And that's,
I doubt it's annoying to your friends.
Well, but like Laura's a very internal processor. It sounds like you're an internal processor as well.
I think so. Or just like, I just speak it out into like, to everybody.
Into the ether.
I'm like, someone's got to have an answer to this. When I had a very public panic attack a few weeks ago after the Uvalde shooting, and very public in the sense that it was like public. I was in a coffee shop and then I was at a park in Williamsburg, like face down in the AstroTurf, hyperventilating, and also posting about it on Instagram and the amount of messages that I got were like, you are not alone. Like, I feel this exact way. Thank you for putting it into words that I couldn't do. Because in that moment, it's so easy to, I was like, I'm insane. Like, why am I reacting so extremely to something that happened across the country for me that has nothing to do with me? Like, why do I feel so strongly about this? Why am I crying in a coffee shop? Because I can't handle this like grief and this existential dread of like, is this the world that we live in? And because I posted about it, I was getting messages of just like, you are not alone. Like, I don't eat for 2 days after I see a headline about a shooting or like something like that. And it feels good to like not be alone. And maybe those are strangers. Maybe it's a cousin that I haven't talked to in a little while who's just like, hey, I share this with you. And so that's how I guess putting it all out there benefits me for once. So I guess external, but just not like, hey, I need to call up a friend.
Have you talked to your friends? Like, so I'm just thinking about like you posting on your close friends, might want to die this week or whatever. Like, have you talked to them about how, like, what response you would want from them? Like, I'm just thinking about.
No, I have not put any expectation. Like, no, that's like totally on me. If I wanted to, I could like post on close. I have so many friends who reach out to me when I post stuff like that. It's just funny. It's the idea of like posting something like that and like clicking through it is funny to me. But there's also the bystander effect of like,
yeah,
Motti's got to have a closer friend that's going to reach out than like me. And they do. And if my friends are listening to this, they help me. My friend Jules literally saved my life that day that I was having that panic attack. And I have very amazing friends. But it's just like the idea of that is just like funny. But no, I don't think that I have. My friends know kind of how to handle it when I'm having a panic attack because I communicate that. But no, sometimes they'll just be like, hey, what do you need in this moment? Because they're like good and they know to ask that. I don't know what I need in that moment. I was truly feeling so insane. I was like, am I going to hurt myself? I don't think so, but I can't stop thinking about death. Mm-hmm. Does that mean I need to go to a mental hospital right this instant? I call my mom. I talk to, my friend who was with me at that moment. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I need to go to a hospital, but I need to do something. And so like, what's the action I need to take in order for like me to be safe right now? And then the next day was better. I don't know. It's just like such a crazy like range of emotions.
Those moments I just find them very vulnerable. And I've had a few of those in the past maybe year. And one of them was pretty scary that well, we'll just talk about it. I haven't talked about it like at all publicly like on our podcast, but the past year I've like been struggling at moments with self-harm thoughts, and that's very new to me in my life. And I've had like some pretty gnarly panic attacks that I've lived by myself before this house for 3 years. Like I've been on my own for a long time. And so I know how to deal with them on my own, where you go through it, and then you like, maybe I'll text someone and be like, haha, I just had a panic attack. Like, not that's like funny. It's not funny, but it's just like the way to communicate sometimes. And now that Laura and I live together, like it's impossible to hide when something like that's happening. So I have told this story before, but basically just one time where I like had to come out and like sit next to her and just let my body like regulate next to her. And it was the most vulnerable and scary thing, like the scariest thing I've ever done, it feels. And in that moment, you ask yourself like, yeah, what do you need? Like, do I need her to take out all the sharp things in my room? Like, do I need her to sleep with me tonight? Like, what do I need? And being scared to like ask for that. And yeah, I'm gonna cry, but it's like a very like, I also feel very lucky to have friends that are so supportive in that. And I think that it's a beautiful thing that you're able to communicate those things, however they're communicated. Like, doesn't really matter the vehicle, like it gets there. And when you have those like relationships, I think it's just a really important thing. And for you to also be a touch point for people and be like, oh yeah, this is a safe thing to feel. Like you're not crazy for feeling something like this, or you're not, you're not, it's like it sucks, but it's normal. Like this is your body reacting to a trauma, whether or not it happened a mile down the road or in another state across the country. Like your body is doing exactly what it needs to be doing to protect yourself, and to be someone who people can be like, yeah, like, thank you for saying that, because I felt like I wasn't allowed to have this emotion, I think is a big deal.
Yeah, it was like, no, it very much was exactly that. Like clearly my body and my mind needed to react this way. I hadn't had a panic attack in a very long time. I'm like, clearly I just needed to do this. And it allowed me to reflect of like, okay, how often am I thinking about death? How often, am I like am I dissociating? How often am I thinking about this and that? And I came up with like a revised treatment plan. Get the fuck back on your Wellbutrin, first of all, make that phone call, make it happen, stop putting it off. So my therapist changed. I got assigned a new one. I was like, this is not a match. So I was like, get rid of him, get a new one. So it was kind of just like, because of that, I'm not gonna just be like, well, had a panic attack, like hopefully that doesn't happen again. So okay, how can we prevent this from happening again? Or like, what is this telling me that I need? What have we learned from this? We've learned that I need to slow the hell down, maybe not consume so much news, get more involved with your community, try to get people in our government who are gonna make gun reform. But yeah, those moments are really scary. You like kind of are like, what am I capable of right now? And it's like really hard to, it's like you're meeting a new like version of yourself, especially if you like take pride in like, I take pride in being like the funny friend and like the bubbly friend, but I'm like, I'm also the suicidal friend. Like, come on.
Yeah, I feel that way of like, I take pride in being the responsible friend, like that whole, and like, oh, now I need help. Like that's, yeah.
Well, it was really great that you went out to Laura and were like, I need to do this. I mean, that's just a huge step in itself, and not like locking yourself in your room and letting yourself like ruminate in those thoughts, because those are wicked thoughts. So that in itself is like amazing.
All right, there's a bug right here and I miss this slide. Not that like those are beautiful words. Thank you. Sorry to mess that up.
No, it's okay.
All right. Does anyone have any closing thoughts?
Did we talk about pride enough? Do you want to talk about the discourse of no kink at Pride? I'm just kidding. Please. Let's not have that. I'm pro kink. Just for the record.
Pro kink. This pod is pro kink officially.
Pro drag queens brainwashing your children. I am pro all of it. The gay agenda.
Hell yeah.
Now. Just to set the record straight.
Mal, Laura,
No, I'm good.
Motti, do you have anything else? Nothing to plug?
I don't think I have anything to plug.
Go watch the music video right now.
Go watch Maddie Lukomski's music video, Lukomski, on YouTube called A Little Louder. It's also on Spotify and Apple Music.
It will get stuck in your head.
It will get stuck in your head. It is a pop. Yeah, I don't have anything. Just like follow me on Instagram and TikTok, Emily P. Motti, if anything that I talked about today is of any interest to anybody. Yeah.
Wait, Motti, so you watch that music video and you're not like, I'm hot. I'm asking for a friend. Really? Like, yes. I'm just putting it out there.
I do like the way that I look in that. No, I guess I do. I know that I'm like good looking because enough people tell you that you're good looking that you believe it. But I'm so ashamed of knowing that I'm good looking. Like, how annoying is it to be like confident? That's so annoying.
You gotta own those smolders. Come on.
Disgusting. Well, it helped that it was like in slow-mo and the lighting was good. And
Oh, shut up.
Okay, yeah, come on.
but yeah, I like the way that I like the way I look. I like it better when I don't have boobs.
Come into
that's what I want to
place
plug.
near you.
Yeah. No, I could be easier on myself.
Trying to hype you up because we all think you're hot. So
thank you. But then it's also like a level of like, I'd rather be confident in the help that I give people than in like what I look like. Anybody can be hot, I guess, right?
Yeah, we don't have to like, our whole worth doesn't depend on it, but like
yeah. You guys are all hot too, by the way.
I had a panic attack the few episodes ago when we were playing like, are you sexy, funny, cute, or smart? And everyone was giving me like sexy, cute, or like sexy, funny. And I literally was like, what the fuck? Like, I don't believe it. But since then I've adjusted my stance and I'm going to try and embody it.
Wait, so you have to be one of those words? Is the
2
game?
of 4 of them.
Yeah.
What am I?
Sexy, funny, or sexy, smart.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, now my AirPods really did die.
It sounds
you still sound the same, yeah. It's all right. I'm gonna close right now. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to you can't hear me.
I can't hear me.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
I can hear you guys now. My AirPods. I'm like, thank God that happened at the end.
That's perfect timing, actually. All right, now I have to
wait. I want to be clear that we think you're a very multifaceted person.
I know.
I just want, like, there's so much more to you than just hotness.
I know. You
I don't want the end of the podcast to just be us all saying that you're.
So you're clear.
We know you're really cool and smart and funny. And,
I know. No,
this needs to end.
I always feel so much better about myself after talking to you guys. So no, I know that.
Well, yay! I'm glad we're all on the same page. And Motti, thank you so much for your just continued vulnerability and willingness to come on our podcast. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you. And we are such big supporters of you and all that you do. And we love to just see you trying new things and saying yes. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm a supporter of you guys as well. And I appreciate the support a lot. And I like coming on here. So have me again.
Literally anytime.
Don't have to ask us twice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, follow Motti on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you like this episode, you can always leave us a rating and review. We really appreciate it.
And we'll put the last episode in the description that Motti was on.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next week.